Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it EPCOT. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast. This is a podcast episode number 29, Listen to the Land, where we'll be taking you back to the Land Pavilion as it was in the early 80s into the mid-90s. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and with me as always tonight is Hal Bowers.
Aloha.
How's it going tonight, Hal?
Good. I'm drinking some dirt tonight because we're celebrating the land.
Ah,
just a nice big glass of dirt right here.
Love those muddy waters.
Yep.
And Mr. JT Kuzier.
Hi, Todd. What's happening?
Not much. You did a phenomenal job last month with the River Country episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think I listened to it like 3 times myself. So
yeah, we got a lot of positive feedback on that. So awesome job overall. And Mr. Brian P. Miles coming in from Philadelphia, where you entertained some guests through the gastronomy world of Southeast Philadelphia this week.
I did. I had a few of my Orlando-based friends up for the Easter weekend, and we did the whole tourist thing here in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. We went to Hershey, Pennsylvania, to Chocolate World out there, and we were in Philadelphia for 2 days, seeing all of the scenes from the American Adventure. I literally took them from place to place saying, this was in the American Adventure, that's in the here's Valley Forge, this was in the American Adventure. It was a lot of fun.
Only Floridians would learn American history backwards. They would visit it at EPCOT first and then visit their real life.
We may reproduce that trip this summer with the Bowers family.
There we go.
Did you get to go to that general store that was in the Time magazine? Was that like an old magazine? Remember, Brian, you found that?
The one from the Franklin Roosevelt radio scene there.
Yeah, that's in the Midwest, right?
That's in Virginia.
That's
in Virginia. Okay. Yeah, I haven't made it. We had a listener right in last year that had sent us pictures and had gone to see it. So on my next trip south of DC, it is my intent to make a pit stop and see that. The brother, can you spare a dime? Part
that's
of
right. Yeah.
This thing. But yeah, we had a great time, and tonight I am drinking water,
just water,
or as we call it in this episode, hydroponics.
That's right.
Engaging in some hydroponics.
Making sure those fluids are all refilled. So, before we jump into all of our main topic, which again, as we mentioned, is Listen to the Land, we're going to go through a couple corrections and comments from the past episodes. We got a couple here. Dan D wrote to us saying that, have we heard the rumors about River Country being built on a large bed of granite, which was mysteriously mined out and shipped north? How you got a smirk on your face? I have not heard of such a thing. Have you?
No.
Okay.
Granite.
Yeah. I mean, the water table. This is sandy soil. This is swamp. I can't. Even if they did, you're not going to get a lot out of it. It was.
Florida's largely limestone, so I don't know where granite would come from. I'm sure there's a Jungle Cruise joke in there somewhere, but
there might be. Yeah, I'll just don't take it for granted. Yeah. We've got another one here. I apologize, I don't have the name, but they did write to us and said, one thing I remember about the flumes at River Country was they did not seem to be fiberglass, more like sheet metal with seams and rivets, and they attached a photo, and you could certainly see the seams there. It was a bit hard on your back if you chose to lie down. I didn't go. Do you guys remember what it was made out of? Was it more of a steel or some sort of galvanized aluminum?
I think that's right, because I can kind of remember that in the old,
must have been comfortable.
The older water parks, it's like you would hit those seams where the pieces would fit together. And after a while, I think it would kind of tear up your back.
It's like an ow, 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 as you went faster and faster.
This is so fun.
There's still seams on the one, like the stern burner and the rudder buster over at Typhoon Lagoon. Those still have seams too, but I think they're a little smoother. But so
yeah, I mean that was one of the earliest versions of that kind of water park. So I completely to me that totally makes sense.
We'll have to take a look at some of the photos of what it looks like now and see if we can spot any rust. But then if it's aluminum, it may not be. But we'll have to maybe reach out to who's we talked to last night, Chuck, and last month rather.
Yeah, Chuck and
and Les.
So,
all right. Also, turning back to the Spaceship Earth episode, Tom Hobson wrote us, and he took a undiscovered EPCOT tour recently, and he asked for us, what's the deal with the pyramids between the ride cars? And he was told that they were originally used for the original audio system on the ride until the refurb in 2007 when it was taken out. And I can only imagine that maybe it's done wirelessly now or something like that.
Well, it actually was done wirelessly then too, which is probably why there was. Yeah, actually, I think it was Tom K. Morris that told us that it used one of the first. I think it was like infrared or. It was some new technology that they had used for the audio there. So
here at EPCOT, we're learning how to transmit audio by infrared technology.
Yeah, and I think the same thing was true of Horizons. I think it used an infrared system,
so that when you hit a certain spot, it knew what to play or beam.
Yeah, well, it would transmit the audio to the car through like infrared lights. So there was a receiver in the car, and then there was a transmitter outside of the thing. It would actually shoot the signal infrared.
That's cool.
Over to it rather than using like wired connections since the cars were constantly moving.
Right. And that way you always hit it at the exact
right. And spot. that replaced the older system like the Haunted Mansion used like a low frequency, like lower than AM transmitter, which, was crackly and not great. Now it sounds much better. Now it's done digitally or something.
Yeah. On Horizons, I always noticed there was always a hiss and a pop, too, that you could hear. It was very silent when you weren't hearing it. Yeah, you could hear. But more on that in Horizons in the near future. So, all right. The last one we have is from Caleb Barris. He says, when the subs were redone at Finding Nemo in Disneyland, they invented a new type of coral for lagoon that wouldn't fade with the chlorine chemical and sun. Remember, guys, we were discussing why the colors were so brilliant under 20,000 Leagues, and he says that they made these resin glass coral this time around because it wouldn't fade with the chemicals and wouldn't fade with the sunlight and everything. And so he says that he has a friend there, and he showed her what the new coral looked like, and they were all excited about that. So it'll be interesting to see. He says the ride makes him dizzy just watching it, and he says the new attraction is mostly rock in your face for the most part. So. All right, and Brian, you had one correction and comment for this month as well, correct?
Yeah, we like to get our information right. And last month, off the top of my head, I was relating the story about the famous advertisement that was shot with Mickey standing atop Spaceship Earth. And after the episode, when I was listening back, I knew I had the facts mostly right, but not completely. So I did a little research of the notes from EPCOT 30. When Bob Garner presented the information on the day that they shot that. So it wasn't somebody yelling at him for shooting it because of the safety aspect. He was reprimanded because there were no traditional Disney characters to be included in EPCOT at the time. And he had Mickey standing atop Spaceship Earth waving. So, but once they saw the clip, they liked it so much they ended up using it in advertisements for like 10 years. And I had said on the episode that he had a rope tied around his waist. That's not accurate. The rope was tied around his feet.
All right.
That's so great that they're like, we don't care if you kill Mickey. Just don't put him in
not
EPCOT.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. Well, that wraps up this month's corrections and comments. As Brian said, we always want to make sure we get everything right. Some people write in to correct our minor mistakes, or we always want to correct ourselves and make sure that we're as accurate as possible. But now it's time to move on to listener mail. JT, running out to the mailbag. It's starting to get warm. No more snowbanks to jump over. Feeling good?
Yeah.
How's the bag getting heavy again?
Well, it was a good month, and I actually focused a little more because I didn't have to do the podcast notes and all that stuff. So lots of mail this month. We're going to bust out, though. All right. First one actually connects to that podcast. See that segue there? The song at the end of the podcast for Whoop and Holler about River Country said, "Where can I get a copy of this? Is it publicly available?" So anybody know that one?
Yes.
The River Country.
I don't know if it's available. You know, it's not downloadable on iTunes, but it is in a special called "The Mouseketeers Go to Walt Disney World," and we lifted it from that, and you can find that on YouTube for your personal Mouseketeer enjoyment. It's a lovely. I think it's from '78, and they get to travel quite a bit around Walt Disney World. They spend some time in the Fiesta Fun Center, which is always cool to see. They do some stuff outside the Contemporary, and they go to River Country, which is a hoot and holler, isn't it?
Right.
It is.
Yep.
Officially, it was 77.
77.
Yep.
They were so excited about Star Wars. They're like, let's go to Disney, dude.
River Country, the complete opposite of Star Wars.
So yeah, that runs a good 48 minutes. It was an hour special. So
really?
There's plenty of really good footage in there of the old stuff. And this will obviously definitely be one of the shows we'll talk about in the future TV specials episode.
So that was from Andy Edwards, but connecting with that was our friend Blake, and he wants to know, are you aware of any place that I can purchase or download some of the old 70s, 80s classic Disney promo music? So kind of like that, he says, in the style of the music that plays in your podcast intro or that plays in the background of the promo film A Dream Called Walt Disney World. So how do you know that one?
That one? That's more of a Todd thing. That one I don't know.
So kind of a similar answer to what House said. There's not a lot of official downloadable albums. A lot of what we mix in comes from different YouTube videos that we found over the years, different promotional films where we've been able to skim the music off of it. Some of the best music is actually one of the albums that we added to the prize pot, which is the official soundtrack of Disneyland and Walt Disney World. There was a 1986 album. I forget the official name. It was the EPCOT Center album. That's got a really, really good instrumental and orchestral music from EPCOT Center and its opening. But a lot of the music, I have never seen any specific tracks or scores of anything, from A Dream Called Walt Disney World or any of those other specials that were out there. There is a site that does have a lot of music sharing from Disney stuff, but again, a lot of times you got to get the video and lift it off that. So yeah, similar answer to where the Mouseketeers music came from.
We need a box set. Someone's got to come out with a box set.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All the great stuff.
All right. So thank you, Todd, for your help on that one. This one I wanted to throw in there. I'm a big fan of this one. I'm curious on the answer. It's from Casey Moore. Says, I have this picture from 1987-ish as a baby. I never got to experience the Dreamfinder / and or Figment meet and greet. I just wondered if anyone has any experience with meeting the Dreamfinder that they could share. What did he do as a character? What was he like? Did Figment, move? Like, tell me, because I'm in the same boat. I never met the Dreamfinder.
Yeah. So the two men who played the Dreamfinder, Steve Taylor and Ron Schneider, both had experience as puppeteers, and the Figment figure that after they put the Dreamfinder costume on, as part of the jacket, the Figment figure was a hand puppet. So if you are looking at a photograph of the Dreamfinder and Figment doing a meet and greet, his actual arm only goes down to the elbow, and the part of the forearm and the hand holding Figment is all part of the puppet that he's operating with his own forearm, kind of slid into a glove that allows him to control Figment's movements and interact with Figment. And so that is the pier behind the glass. But how they met was it was just like it was in the ride. The Dreamfinder would say, "Oh, hello, how are you?" And Figment would not talk. Figment would just nod and smile and bite your hat and things like that. But they would the Dreamfinder carried the conversation, and it was always a very fun meet and greet. There's some videos on YouTube if you Google, I know we sent one to Casey directly, but if you take a look, and maybe we'll put one in the show notes. There's some good videos of meet and greets. I met
the Dreamfinder. There is some good stuff when I was young, and then Figment, just as you said, Brian, was taking off my brother's hat and throwing it on the ground. My brother was silly enough just to put it right back on his head again, and of course Figment reached over and take it off again. So
Figment was mischievous that way.
He was very mischievous, and I do remember the Dreamfinder, saying he tipped his hat to my father, and good day, have a good day, sir, and on the camera. So we've got that video. I'll have to post that up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it was a really nice meet and greet too. Pretty cool.
And hopefully someday it comes back with whatever the next incarnation of the ride is. If they bring to the Dreamfinder back to join Figment, hopefully we get to see that meet and greet again. So thanks. Great question, Casey.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Big one. All right, so we're moving along. This one is one that I really like because I think if you're going to the parks anytime soon, you can kind of check this one out for the answer. I recently saw a picture. This is from Cody, by the way. I recently saw a picture of the Magic Kingdom Skyway at the Magic Kingdom, and it reignited some questions I had about the classic attraction. Where did the Skyway load and unload in Tomorrowland in relation to the current construction of that land? And he says, I know it unloaded near the Rapunzel restroom area in Fantasyland nowadays, but was curious about its Tomorrowland area. And he's also heard many stories as to why it eventually closed down, but I wondered if you guys had a definitive answer. So, Tomorrowland, where was it?
Well, I'll answer the Tomorrowland side, and then Hal can take the Fantasyland side. The Tomorrowland side, you can still experience the Skyway station because the bathrooms underneath it are still there. They demolished the rest of it, but the bathrooms behind the stage for usually the Stitch show and the Tomorrowland dance party and whatever else they do over there, those bathrooms were the base of the building that was the Tomorrowland transit station for the Skyway. So that's where that was there, and it took you up and made a left-hand turn over Fantasyland and brought you down where, Hal?
Well, it brought you down, as I said, where the Rapunzels are now. There was a pretty big hill there, and a very beautiful little Swiss Alpine station that was nestled up on the hill.
And that stayed there for a good 10 years after they closed it.
Oh my gosh, for a really long time. One detail about the Tomorrowland station, so if you were in line getting into Space Mountain and you turn right and look at those bathrooms, there was a second floor up there, and there was a really cool little waterfall, very modern waterfall on the end of it. So when you came off of the, or I should say when you came out or were going into the station, it's like you went over this little cool little waterfall.
I feel like it was very Epcot-y, the waterfall. Like it was
really cool. And one of our early films that we restored, we'll have to find out which one, actually has footage on the Tomorrowland loading platform. And one of the reasons I remember it is you're on the platform in the film, and then the guy gets in his Skyway vehicle, and as he's pulling away from the station, he's filming. And I just remember in the line in the queue to get on the ride is nuns and some Navy guys all in their uniforms. Right. And I'm like,
the nun was actually the Navy guys. The nun was riding from one of
the other cars.
No, she was coming out of the Fantasyland station, and that's in my grandfather's film. And then I believe the sailors are in the Prestige.
Oh yes, the old sailor video. Right. I remember this.
Yeah. So nuns and sailors loved the Skyway.
Yeah, on your day off, what are you gonna do?
Right. Oh, and one other little detail is the giant weight that actually held the stuffed tot, I guess the cable. I was going to say string, but that's not the word. That was actually on the Tomorrowland side.
Yep. And for those of interested too, that they only demolished that second floor around 2009, somewhere in there, when they redid those bathrooms. So it was there until pretty recent.
Yeah, both of them were there for about the same length of time. I think the Rapunzel bathrooms were somewhere around 2012 they finished them, or 2013, something like that they opened. But the Alpine one was they used that as a backdrop a lot of times during special events for character meet and greets. Right. So after they closed it, like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs would meet there during the Christmas party and things like that with that Alpine backdrop. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was
eventually
a really
became
spot.
stroller parking.
Yeah.
for a
So
little
if you
while.
really want to get the experience, go to both bathrooms and utilize them, and you will have experienced both the stations.
It's funny. I wonder if there's any kind of statement that there's bathrooms where
At both ends.
at both
You
ends where
rode
they
that thing, you had to get off and go to the bathroom right away. It was slow moving.
You had a creative urge to. I wonder if there's a men's room around here.
Now, why it closed, there are a ton of stories around that. And Disneyland's actually closed before Walt Disney World's did. So, I mean, there's
rumors of stories of somebody being dragged off the platform, a cast member.
Yeah,
in
that happened.
1999.
That
did
happened. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
real thing. A cast member either died or was injured. For some reason, he was working there and he hung on instead of letting go. And then he finally
Oops.
let go over
Gosh.
that wasn't.
Yeah. So I mean, but if you think about it, there's any variety of reasons. The first and probably largest reason is their insurer probably begged them to close that attraction. I mean, it's an open air thing. You're over literally thousands of people. It became a funny thing for kids to drop stuff on people, sometimes gross things on people. It was a slow load. There were always long lines. It was not a high capacity attraction. So, and frankly, it was kind of pedestrian. It was something you could find at any Six Flags park or something else, and so I think all of those things combined kind of made it where it just kind of reached a point where they said, this is not really it doesn't belong. And it ruined sight lines and things like that. Although it was cool to see in the videos now, there wasn't really a whole lot of mystery when you're riding on top, looking down on the tops of show buildings and seeing air conditioning units and,
Dirty,
security guards standing up there walking around on their smoke break. And
I mean, the funny thing
also-
was you could walk between the two stations faster than you could wait in line and then ride.
right. Right.
Exactly. The other thing too is in the area where Small World Peter Pan is, that's a very congested area to begin with. When you had those the posts for the Skyway in there, they presented some obstacles for, as carriages got bigger and wider and and the crowds began to grow. There was a traffic flow problem as well in that area that it certainly didn't help it.
Now, I have a recollection of riding it maybe once.
That was a few times I remember. 98 was the last time I was on.
I think we rode it in 95, but I don't think I rode it any other time.
All right, so we got a big email from Thomas Lane, but one question I was actually curious about, because you guys went there during this time period, he wanted to know what were the wait times on the popular attractions back in the 70s and 80s compared to now? Were they longer, shorter? How was that?
Well, I know in some of our films we've got, one of the recent films from the 70s, we've got a picture of the Jungle Cruise where it is just backed up beyond belief, and I think that was in a summer or late summer or even November time frame. I remember in the at least my first trip in the 80s, I remember waiting a fair amount of time for a number of the attractions. I don't recall there ever being 3-hour waits for anything, but I remember Space Mountain being up there in the 80s, an hour wait. How you may remember more of their earlier years as well.
Yeah, we tended to travel in Easter time, so the park was very busy. So, like a ride like Tiki Room would be 15-20 minutes. You definitely go through like 2 cycles outside before you got inside. Jungle Cruise, 60 minutes to 80 minutes. Even as late as when Splash Mountain opened, it had 90-minute waits, and that was the 90s. And I mean, that was the hot ride at the time, so that makes sense. But yeah, right. Haunted Mansion, 60 minutes, 70
exactly.
minutes.
You look at our films, Hot Summer Sun, and the Haunted Mansion queue extending well into Liberty Square.
Yeah.
All the way around to the riverboat landing and beyond sometimes. You look at the country. I mean, the Country Bears is incredible. All of our footage from the 70s and early 80s.
Pile outside.
There is a line out into Frontierland, all the way down, through this huge extended queue outside, and then down to where like the candy store is now and all. Yep. I mean, the Country Bears must have been an hour wait.
Yeah, Haunted Mansion. I'm sorry, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
20,000
minutes.
That was
easily.
And Tomorrowland Speedway, which continues to be an hour plus wait a lot of times. Still one of the most poorly covered queues in the world, but that one's up there. So,
Space Mountain. I can recall late 80s Space Mountain. You would go The line would stretch outside down under that piece of wedway track that kind of heads over, and you'd be out in the middle of Tomorrowland almost as far as the Starjets is where you would catch the beginning
and
of the
think
line.
about how long that queue is once you get inside.
And this is the days before any queue that is interactive. There was not much.
So now, to put it into perspective, though, back then, it was the time that Hal's talking about, that spring break Easter time, they got absolutely slammed. They got absolutely slammed in the summertime, and they'd get slammed Thanksgiving and Christmas. The rest of the year tended to be a lot lighter. You could if you went in February or if you went in October, you could kind of wander in and encounter light crowds, as we've seen in some of our films, and not run into those kinds of waits.
Even Christmas Day in '87, the park was totally dead. That was before they started doing the Christmas parades. People just weren't accustomed to going at Christmas yet. I mean, everything was a walk-on. And of course, Epcot, the Future World attractions, all had hour and a half waits when Epcot first opened, up until about the very late 80s or early 90s.
Yep. I have a film from video from '86 going around the loop, and you can hear my parents, "Oh my God, look at the crowds!" And Outside Horizons and Universe of Energy and World of Motion, just throngs of people.
And those were all rides that were doing 4,000, 5,000 people an hour.
Those are Omnimover rides where they're just continually loading you on, no pre-show. You're just right on there.
And there is just lines out the
well, I've seen it. You see the land, which we'll talk about tonight. But we have slides and pictures of the land where the line came upstairs out the door all the way out to where the living seas.
Yeah, they eventually had to start metering the people in the building because the building can only handle so much.
That's it exactly. That's it. Yeah, they would only let so many people in the building, and then when people would leave the building, they would let another group of that same size into the building to go do some attractions.
If you ever want to know why they built a gigantic queue for Soarin', aside from the size of the theaters that they needed to build, that's part of why, to swallow up those people that used to spill out into the attraction area, into the atrium.
All right, so thank you, Thomas. Hopefully that enlightened you on the excitement of Disney in the 70s and 80s there. Good Lord. That sounds insane. So here's a good one, and this is from Reese, our friend Reese. She said, and it leads kind of right into our main topic. Why did they change the interior and overall theme for the land? Based on what I have seen, it was based on a farmer's market type theme, but it changed into a restaurant theme. What was the purpose for that?
Well, we will cover the changing dining theming tonight in our episode, so stay tuned, Reese.
Or fast forward. So,
all right, well, let's close up the listener mailbag, right?
Wow, thank you for all the messages everywhere. Appreciate that. Podcast at retrowdw.com. For comments, corrections, whatever you want to tell us, send it. We love getting your pictures, videos, anything like that. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook as well.
All right, well, it's time for this month's audio rewind, where we play a clip from the past in one of the Walt Disney World Resort parks, and you have to guess what that sound is from. So before we get to this month's winner, let's take a listen to last month's audio rewind puzzler. All right, guys, so two of you guys got it. I know how you got it. JT, you had a little trouble with it. Brian, what did you say? You didn't know?
I didn't know what it was.
You didn't know it. So this month, of all the entries we received, we only received 3 correct entries. So this one, we really stumped you guys. I'm going to go through some of the different responses that we got, and let's see how we did. So Hal, cue up the ding 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 versus the buzzer here, and let's see how our listeners did. We've got the World of Motion motorcycle cop, the plane in the Casablanca scene of the Great Movie Ride,
Ooh, that's
the
a good
hand
one.
crank on the commemorative pressed penny machine, Big Thunder Mountain going up the incline.
That hand crank guess is a really good
Spirit of America Fife and Drum Corps at the American Adventure. Well, I could see that, yeah. Another vote for Big Thunder. Space Mountain. The rattling of the not-so-bumper cars at the Tomorrowland Speedway. Penny Arcade, and finally an old original Magic Kingdom stroller going over the Adventureland Bridge. And yes, that is the correct answer. And guys, we tweeted that out. Just actually, if you're not following us on Twitter, we gave away this answer about a week and a half before the podcast came out, somewhere in there.
Now, I wonder if one of our 3 correct answers is a super fan and they saw it.
They might have. I might have heard it. So, congratulations to Ali Jurgens for winning this month's prize, which is pins and a number of different pieces of ephemera. And I do have a confession to make. It's not the Adventureland Bridge, but it was so close. It was actually being pushed over the Crystal Palace Bridge, but it made the same sound, so we used the soundtrack from that. But I don't think...
For you connoisseurs,
if you can tell the difference between
the
Crystal Palace Bridge versus...
There's probably somewhere we have a blind listener who's very angry at you right now because they knew the answer.
I can't believe that the cadence of the stroller wheels was completely up.
I would have guessed that.
I thought it was the Jaminators for sure.
All right. Well, as always, we throw a selection of retro WDW pins into the prize pot, and I've got some additional ephemera to add this month, as well as some retro WDW stickers. And I have a special thing. I have a Nunes Wave Machine shirt we're going to add to this month, and we're going to throw that into the prize for this month. If you can guess this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler.
Yo there! Listen up, all you rad dudes! Walt's House is rocking with a mania that's hit the street with a brand new beat!
Gosh, sounds like a party! Maybe I should bake a cake.
Timbers, Goofy! It's not that kind of party! It's a death jam! And we're invited to groove!
All right, if you think you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind Puzzler, send your guesses to podcast@retrowdw.com. All entries should be received by May 22nd, 2017. We'll pick a random winner from all correct answers. All entries will be entered into our summer prize pot. And JT, we've got that. It's grown pretty big. What do we got this month coming? What's the list looking like?
All right. So far, we have the Walt Disney at the Fair 4-CD set, the official album of Walt Disney World 1981 LP record, the Little Golden Book from 1971, Surprise to Mickey Mouse, and we are ready for our next prize.
That's right. So we are adding, this is kind of like a very media-oriented prize pot. You know, we got a CD, we have the LP, we've got the book, and we're going to add another book. It's come from my collection. It's All Aboard the Wonderful World of Walt Disney's Trains, which is a great book all about the different trains that he had. So we're adding that into the prize pot that is growing. So as always, as we said, if you all entries, regardless if they're right or wrong, will be entered into the prize pot, which will be pulled in June 2017. So get your entries in. Again, even if you don't know it, just take a stab at it, take a crack. You never know if you're right, and you never know if you will win the prize pot. Once again, send your entries to podcast@retrowdw.com. All right, well, it's about time we get to our main topic. And as we said earlier, this month we're going to be taking you back to the Land Pavilion. We did go back and talk about Kitchen Cabaret about, 10, 11 episodes ago. But there's a lot more in that pavilion to talk about. And we're also going to go over some of the design and operation of the pavilion, some history and facts, and really talk about two of the main attractions that were there when it opened, which is Listen to the Land and Symbiosis, which is a movie that was in the Harvest Theater. So we're going to get to those in a little bit, but Brian, you've penned together a lot of different notes here, and you got to kind of kick off with some of the history of this pavilion and how it got started.
Yes, I'll be the live narrator for your boat this evening for your journey through the Land Pavilion. So the Land was one of the original planned pavilions for Epcot in its many iterations. There was always going to be some kind of an agriculture based pavilion. And so originally this pavilion was supposed to be environmentally themed. The sponsor was going to be Georgia Pacific, which was a logging company. And with that original thought in mind, Tony Baxter, Disney Imagineer and legend, was put in charge of the original design for the Georgia Pacific environmental themed pavilion. So a little bit about Tony Baxter's design, which does exist. He completed a full model of the pavilion and the attractions that were going to be in it. It was displayed at the Expo, the Disney Expo in 2015, I think, or 2013. I don't remember. I think it was 2015 that they displayed the model for the pavilion. But very briefly, his original design for the pavilion was a series of crystals. The structure was a series of crystals with 5 environments inside those crystals and those spheres, and plus an agricultural and an urban setting. And he had designed an attraction called the Blueprints of Nature. And what would happen was the blueprints unfolded in the snowflakes of winter, then the seeds of springtime, the flowers of summer, the leaves of the fall. And you would observe all of this in 2 ways. You entered his pavilion originally into a carousel of progress type theater where you would see kind of a pre-show and then exit that and enter a balloon ride, which was using the same ride system as Peter Pan, where you're suspended from a track that's over top of you. So you would board this thing like a balloon ride, and it would take you through the 4 seasons. You would start at a snow-capped mountain and then follow the journey of water all the way through nature and the Earth's ecosystems. And there was animated plants and things like that as you went throughout it. And the carousel show at the beginning would have introduced you to the land keeper, who would serve as the guest guide throughout the pavilion. Tony Baxter, if you've ever read any of his biographies or seen interviews with him, he's got an obsession with the Wizard of Oz, and for a period of time he was obsessed with these crystals and spheres. So when he worked on Discovery Bay, which was an aborted environment for Disneyland, right? Hal? Yes?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. It's going to sit, or it would have sat about where Star Wars Land is going now.
Yeah. So the original idea, he talked about that at one of the Destination Ds or something I was at, and I'm trying to remember what's the name of the movie. It's an awful movie, but Journey to the Island at the Top, the Island at the Top of the World, right? Yeah. So if you ever watch The Island at the Top of the World, which was a Disney film, there are so many elements in there that you then see picked up in Journey to Imagination and other things that came after it. But Island at the Top of the World was this film that Disney did in the 70s that they had Tony Baxter design. He designed this land based on the film, anticipating it being a success. It ended up being a bomb, so they decided not to build any worlds around it. That's from him and his interview that I saw a few years ago. But as with all things at Imagineering, especially Tony Baxter things, nothing dies. So this, Emerald City Crystal Sphere went from Discovery Bay to the land pavilion that he did. When Georgia Pacific eventually gets dropped from the project as the sponsor, Tony Baxter is taken off of it, and he actually moves on to, we think, Big Thunder right then. But then he's eventually assigned to the next pavilion at Epcot, which is Journey to Imagination, which has a crystal pyramid when you go in, and the landkeeper became the Dreamfinder. That pavilion, if you remember the original Journey to Imagination ride, started with a carousel. The ride vehicles were on a carousel, the turntable that you began on, and so a lot of those things Tony Baxter simply took over to the next pavilion. So Georgia Pacific was replaced by Kraft. Kraft offered $30 million if Disney put up the other $30 million. So they split it and made the pavilion about food. With Kraft as the sponsor, it was all redesigned. Tony Baxter moved on. And Disney brought in 2 guys, Claude Coates and Raleigh Crump, 2 Imagineers who worked directly for Walt Disney. Raleigh Crump says in his book that Claude, quote, fumbled the initial presentation to Kraft, and the next day Marty Sklar came to him and said, you have to do the presentation today. And after Raleigh's presentation, they agreed to go ahead and sponsor the pavilion. So we move on to the actual design of the new pavilion, the one we know today. Raleigh Crump, I've been corrected on how to pronounce his name. worked with Carl Hodges from the University of Arizona, who was working with hydroponics trying to figure out how to grow tomatoes in space. And Carl taught Raleigh all about horticulture. Raleigh and Carl came up with a whole attraction based on live plants and presented this to the Disney executives. So Hal tells a story about John Hench and Rowley having a fight in the Kitchen Cabaret episode. And they also had a fight here. When Rowley was presenting this live plants ride, John Hench went berserk, saying they had to be fake, that you couldn't do an attraction with live plants because they would die. And the whole time, Rowley's sitting there with Carl Hodges, this horticulture expert next to him, saying, no, that's not true. It'll work. Marty Sklar, who was the head of Imagineering at the time, eventually decided that he agreed with Raleigh. And that's why you have the greenhouses today as the second half of the land, living with the land. So what you eventually ended up with was the largest pavilion in Epcot. It was 5 acres. It is 6 now with the addition of the Soarin' building. If you look at the building from the outside, the glass structure over it is meant to invoke possibly a volcano, a mountain, a greenhouse, or as Rowley said, all three. And the entry mural on the building and the walk up into the building, which if you visit today is still there, is a favorite Disney factoid that people in the know love to show off to their not as well-informed friends and family. So, Todd, you have something on that, don't you?
Yeah, so the murals out front that flank the right and left sides as you're coming into the pavilion, they're actually individual, they're mirrors of each other. And they were done, the concept art was done by Walter Perigoy, or Perigoy, I believe is how you pronounce it. He got his start, he was a painter and a designer, but he did work with the Disney company prior to coming up with this artwork. He was the lead background painter on Sleeping Beauty. And he also was background artist on 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone as well. And then he went over and did some stuff for Scooby-Doo, and then he returned to WED in 1977 through 1983. So he had a lot of design elements to Epcot. And if you search online, you can certainly find a lot of his concept artwork of what the Land Pavilion should look like, as well as these murals. Now, the interesting thing that, I should say he also did a lot of the design and concept work inside Imagination Pavilion as well. Now, the interesting tidbit that Brian's talking about is that these murals are actually made from our mosaic, very similar to what you see inside of Cinderella's castle. So if you go up real close to it, you'll notice that the entire mural is made with, these individual, maybe 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter square tiles, somewhere in that size. And the legend goes that Walter did not like to have any of his items be replicated. So he didn't want to have 2 pieces of art that were identical. Even though one is a mirror image of the other, he still made a simple change in that one tile on one side has an emerald color and one tile in the same exact position on the other side has a ruby red color to it, or a dark brownish color. So need to know where to look to find those. And so that's kind of interesting. And how you love Walter's work is amazing. The stuff that he's done and the conceptual stuff, and some of his stuff is a little on the strange side, I would say.
It's very funky. It's very organic, which I think makes it work really well inside of that pavilion.
Yeah.
Especially the way they carried it into the roof, into the ceiling once you step in. So yeah,
it's geometric in a way as well. I don't know if it's meant to convey it, but it certainly does look like it to me. I think it's supposed to do this, that those murals look like different layers of soil in the earth, of rocks moving underneath
that's exactly
each
what
other,
it is.
and tectonic plates and whatnot. It's really cool. So that entrance has changed over time. Now you've got that running waterfall down the middle. Before it was, I believe it was a little more narrow on the sides. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hal. Right? It was just kind of a bland planter in the middle. Nothing really too exciting.
Oh yeah, there was a planter, and there was the sign for the Land Pavilion.
Right, the sign
like
where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big triangular copper-colored or bronze-colored sign, not as colorful as the one that exists today. It was copper with kind of a light orange lettering or light yellow lettering.
Very classy.
Yeah. I remember seeing that.
Like all of 1982 Epcot, very classy.
Exactly. So, and Walter's artwork, as Hal mentioned, really, as you went into the pavilion, you immediately saw it and blended into the ceiling. This is probably a really good segue into the balloons that had hidden and Raleigh's designs on them.
Absolutely. It's a signature piece of the atrium and the impression that you get as soon as you walk into the building. It's still there today, although they've changed twice over the course of the last 35 years. And when you walked into the atrium, and the one that Raleigh Crump designed, there were 3 balloons at the center that moved up and down, representing food groups. Just while we're on the balloons, the 1993 refurbishment, which we'll touch on later, replaced it with 5 balloons that represented weather. And a subsequent refurb in 2005 ceased the movement of the balloons. So now they are stationary.
And when they did go up and down, we mentioned this on a previous podcast, if you stood in a specific spot on the left-hand side after you went through the pavilion and looked up and waited for the timing of the balloons, they would form a hidden Mickey head. It was kind of interesting.
There you go.
So, look at that. But you can no longer... That's a moving hidden Mickey that is no longer there.
Right. So the pavilion had 3 opening attractions. One is Kitchen Cabaret, which we covered in a previous episode, and I encourage you, if you haven't listened to that one, to go back and listen to it. The film Symbiosis, which we'll speak about tonight. And the marquee attraction when it opened was a boat ride that is still there today, called, at that time, Listen to the Land. There were also 2 dining options in the pavilion, which we'll cover this evening. A farmer's market food court on the first level, and on the second level, a rotating restaurant called The Good Turn. So this is what guests were greeted with when they entered the building for the first time in 1982. This was an opening day attraction. The building was completed. All of the attractions were completed. The restaurants were all open for business. So unlike a lot of the rest of Epcot, this building was ready to go the day they cut the ribbon, and they started taking guests on previews on the 28th of September. So it was probably one of the first up and running functional. If you listen to us talk about the American Adventure, I mean, that one they were holding together with tape and toothpicks, trying to get it running on opening day, and it wasn't open. Imagination wasn't done for another year. Horizons wasn't done for another year. The Living Seas didn't exist. So opening day Epcot, the land was where it was at. So the Listen to the Land boat ride was themed. The caption underneath of it was "Set sail for tomorrow's harvests." So there are 16 boats plus 2 spares. And while I've seen various counts, the most reliable one is up to 38 people per boat, depending obviously on the size of the people. And the first thing you were greeted with upon boarding this boat, and we'll touch a little bit on the boat design, they were originally open top as in their design, and then when the Imagineers decided to add real water and rain effects to the rainforest scene, they added a canopy to the boats out of necessity.
I think that was necessity, and I think it also added a bit of intimacy to the ride that you would not have had with an open. Granted, you couldn't see a lot of the effects that we'll talk about later that were done purposely high up because of the restaurant. But I think it did bring you closer and forced you to look out rather than wandering eyes.
I agree with that. I think it enhances the actual effectiveness of the attraction. So originally you had a live narrator. From the time the ride opened until 2006, when you boarded the boat, there was someone in the front of the boat who was a live narrator who sat there and talked you through most of the scenes with a script. In 2006, they were replaced with recorded narration. But the most earwormy part of the ride originally was the song "Listen to the Land." And you were greeted with it through the opening and closing scenes, and at various times throughout the ride, instrumentally in the background. The song "Listen to the Land," was written by a gentleman named Bob Moline. And Bob Moline comes into Epcot in a number of important places. And there are 2 apocryphal versions of how Bob Moline came to Disney's view. and got the job to write this song and several other famous songs for EPCOT. And the one piece of the story that everyone agrees on is that it was a bar/restaurant in Newport Beach where he was performing. And there's two stories I've heard. The one version is that there was a private event at this Newport Beach event bar for Disney executives, and he was hired to perform. The other version, which I find a little more believable, is that the bar was frequented by Disney executives when they were out in that neck of the woods, and he was a standard performer for the bar, and they liked him. And one night after a few drinks, they said, "You should write some songs for us." I like that version better. So he wrote a jingle for Disneyland first. I think it's called "It Happens at Disneyland," and so from there they tasked him with writing songs for EPCOT. And he wrote a few very memorable ones. In addition to Listen to the Land, he is also the gentleman who wrote America, Spread Your Golden Dream for the American Adventure attraction. And yes, absolutely. Hal, do you know what other songs he wrote?
Well, I know that he wrote Canada, Your Lifetime Journey.
That would have been my guess, yeah.
And Energy, You Make the World Go Round. Energy.
So... no slop here. I mean, if you have the official album of EPCOT, he's responsible for almost half the songs from the opening run. He really prodigious stuff that really stuck with people. No real clunkers there. So Bob Moline was the songwriter and gave us that soundtrack to the back. And in the opening scene, you'd hear his music, and it was the Symphony of the Seed. And that was a look at how plants grow and spread. And you could see seeds being blown by the wind, and the music plays in the background. And so it was this kind of like you were oversized, you're miniaturized as you're going through and seeing all of the plant life and all around you. That was really oversized and colorful, very green.
It was kind of abstract in a way too.
Very Rolly Crump, if you're familiar with
Raleigh's stuff,
Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and the Tower of the Four Winds and the other stuff that Rolly Crump has done, very much in his art motif.
But it was all 3D. There was, I remember the pulsating lights through vines and different things, which was really neat. It gave it showing the nutrients flowing through the plants and down to these giant flowers and everything. It was an interesting introduction.
Absolutely. So that was your opening scene, and then you would start moving into the animatronic scenes that we know today, that are still on the ride. The first being the rainforest scene. And you'd move into the rainforest scene. There was actual water falling over the boat. Which
so I've got a note here from Mr. Birnbaum too, that it wasn't just we're going to talk a little bit later about the photo cells that turn things on and off. But he says the water on the leaves and trunks was supplied by a special drip system that provided a constant flow of moisture. So, there's talk about the rain coming on and off as the boat, but this kind of goes against the grain there. And I how you remember it too, it was really wet and moist in there. I remember the boats, when they pulled up, they were dripping. There was no shortage of water, and I remember it coming down the sides too.
Well, it was a rainforest after all.
Exactly.
That's what you do.
I don't think it's as damp as it used to be in there, though.
No, it's the rain. The rain is gone. Many of the effects that used to work in this section of the attraction have been removed over the course of years, and we can talk about them as we go along.
Or just broken and never repaired.
Yeah. So that's one.
Yeah, that is one.
But it does not rain anymore.
Yeah, and it used to be very muggy in there, if you remember.
Yeah.
You used to go in there and there was this intense humidity, all adding to the effect. But so you would go through there as you do today, and you see animatronic bugs and animals. You have to spot them. A lot of them today don't move. But when
there's alligators, right?
Yeah,
alligators,
there's some Jungle Cruise crocodiles in there.
Ladybugs, butterflies.
There's a monkey.
A giant. Is there a snail in there, or is it just in the University of Energy? There may be a snail in there too.
Yeah, I think the monkey is the same as Cheetah in the Great Movie Ride, but I haven't been able to confirm that. But
I think it needs some big frogs. The elusive Listen to the Land frogs.
Yes. So that's your initial scene that you go through, and then that scene was to show you how plants had to overcome a lack of light in order to grow. Then you move into a desert scene, which in the past had some kind of blowing effect, right, Hal?
Yeah, this is one of the things that I didn't realize it was there. Maybe that was one of the reasons why it's not there anymore. But Tom Nabby told us that there was a giant machine that was in there. They had a massive amount of sand, and this machine would it was like a auger that would sort of like suck the sand up to the top, and then it would blow the sand across the scene, and it would get collected on the other side, and then take it by conveyor belt back over to this auger that would raise it back up so that it could be blown across again.
Yeah.
So, and then the heat was added as well, which is no longer there. I remember transitioning from that rainforest into the desert scene. You would go from that dank, humid air to that just this blast of heat that would really, really, set the tone correctly for it. The desert's hot, exactly.
Right. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, so I have Walt Disney's EPCOT Center book in front of me here, and they talk about how the photo cells that were there were electric eyes, if you will, as the boats came in, that would obviously trigger these types of functions so that you could see it. The idea too was, and actually apparently the volume would go up, the monkey volume would go up, or the sounds of the air moving would go up.
Well, if you've ever been in a rainforest cafe, you know how annoying that can be if the thing's going full blast the entire time.
Right. So apparently they did that on purpose.
Or if you've ever dined in a real rainforest next to a really loud monkey.
That's true. Yeah, you never know when that boat comes by. He just goes nuts. But that was actually done for the people upstairs in the restaurant, which we're going to talk about, because they wanted them to feel as if the boat was starting to interact with the environment, that it was upsetting the monkeys, that it was causing something and causing some sort of change.
Yeah, so the first scene was to show you them growing without light. The second scene in the desert was to show that plants could adapt and survive despite the lack of water. So there were like cactus and things like that in that scene. And then you moved into a prairie scene. And the prairie scene, the tour guide would explain that the unpredictable weather of the prairies caused problems for plant life there. Two examples of this unpredictability, wildfire and storms, could be seen on the horizon as guests traveled through.
So the EPCOT book says, and I never got this, but supposedly in the desert, the lightning causes the wildfire, which then stirs up locusts, and the locusts apparently are supposed to be like coming out at the boat. So I don't know if there was a projection attached to that.
There used to be a projection on the back, but it was just kind of this rotating black dots. It never really gave the effect that they were coming towards you.
They would have been better off sicking actual locusts on you.
Yes. All triggered by an electric eye.
So we also, there's a legend, which, some people will say is confirmed because it's been in 100 books, that the buffalo and the prairie dogs in that scene were from the molds originally designed for Mark Davis's Western River expedition, right, Hal?
That's right. I reached out to Tom K. Morris, who in turn reached out to Christopher Merritt, and Christopher Merritt said that a guy in Maypo told him that those were created for that show, and it got carried over. So I'm going to say that's got to be true. I've heard that from enough people now.
And if you haven't listened to all our episodes and don't know what it is, the footnote here is Western River Expedition was an original attraction designed for Walt Disney World, really a whole land designed for Walt Disney World with, I think, 3 different attractions in it.
Yeah.
That would have been back in the area where Big Thunder and Splash Mountain are now, and ultimately was scrapped right after the park opened in favor of building Pirates of the Caribbean there, because supposedly guests came and complained that there was no Pirates of Caribbean there, so Card Walker ordered them to build a Pirates Pronto, which opened 2 years later in 1973. Anyway, that's Western River Expedition and the buffaloes. You move from that prairie scene onto a turn-of-the-century farm, which a lot of people love. It's got an animatronic dog on the porch and an animatronic rooster chicken in the scene too, if I remember correctly.
There's a goat, I believe.
Yeah, a couple of goats, lots of chickens.
Yep. And you want to walk right up to the door, and you want to see if you can go inside.
Absolutely. and there's something about the address on the mailbox too. Isn't the mailbox address like 1982 or 1905? Or...
The mailbox says B. Jones, RFD 82. So presumably the 82 refers to the 1982 opening of EPCOT.
I have another interesting fact too. So the tree is a sycamore, and it is actually duplicated from one that stands outside of a Burbank, California car wash. Well, at least it stood there in 1982. Whether or not it's there anymore.
No touch.
Rolly Crump's favorite car wash.
Exactly. So if you know where Raleigh's rockin' no touch car wash is, you can find us that tree. It was modeled and molded after that one. So, and the leaves are polyethylene that were made in Hong Kong. So,
very cool. So, while we talked about, this is all the opening scenes of the ride, and they are all very Disney-esque because you're moving through these, staged scenes with animatronics and effects. And then you move into a transition scene. From the farm, you move into a barn. The boat sails into a barn, and then a theater inside of the barn. It looks like a barn. And inside there was you would hear the Listen to the Land song again in kind of a hillbilly form. And there were slides and motion pictures accompanied, very similar to how it's done today. Today, it's this famous narration where here at EPCOT, we're learning that by rotating the soil and doing this, we can find 10% more of that. So back then, it was very similar in terms of the narration, except it was delivered by a live guide. And they talked to you about being a better partner with the land and farmers using better pesticides and fertilizer. And images of various forms of agriculture were shown in the barn, while the tour guide explained that the research that was continuing to make agriculture more efficient, and examples were, fertilizers and seeds and better machines. And the guide would also drop the first factoid on guests here to wow them that much of the food served in EPCOT Center was used growing with these techniques. So that's the theater that you sail through there before the big greenhouse reveal. And once you sailed out of there, you sail into the live greenhouses, which, sailing through a greenhouse was something that I don't know that has ever been done since, but certainly hadn't been done before 1982. So it was one of those wow moments of EPCOT, where you sailed into an active working greenhouse. And the first culture that you sailed into, and it's the same today, was the tropics, where you would see things like papayas and bananas and rice. And the first thing that the narrator would ask you is, please do not touch the plants, which I guess was a problem when they first started sailing through. People wanted to reach out and touch a papaya.
And I think still to today, people are amazed. And I remember the narrators back then would make it a point that, here we have bananas growing a foot away from rice in the same soil because we're doing it right and we're making sure we, the irrigation and all that. So it still is. I'm taking the behind the scenes tour next week. I'm really interested to see this stuff up firsthand. And I think it's still to this day very relevant and really interesting to see this stuff.
Yeah. And it is I think this is the scene that also has the 9-pound lemon and some of the other, some of the other cool things as your first, because they have the placards that show you which, everything that's growing. And so from the tropics, you then move into the aquacell, which is fish farming. And in today's narration, they explained to you a little bit about sustainable fish, which wasn't really the message in 1982. Back then it was, and the lighting in 1982 was a little more dramatic in there, in terms of they had different like neon kind of colors in the different tanks. To now it's very kind of plain Jane with just that whole red from the red canopy over it to shield it from the sun. Gives it a little bit more of a different feel to it than you had in 1982. But the big push then, as today, is that you can eat many of these fish right here in EPCOT, which I'll get to also and mention in Raleigh Crump's finale for all of this. But the other thing that I do want to mention is every time I sail through now and you get to the first you go by the big tanks that have the tilapia and catfish in it all. And then towards the end, before you move into the next greenhouse, there are those tubes, and the tubes back then had all kinds of fish life in them. Today, it's always like you go through and it's like the abandoned amusement park from Scooby-Doo. There's like 3 of them that are broken with nothing in them. One has like a sad fish with a broken fin. And then there's always the freshwater, there's the eel one, and then the American freshwater shrimp. And there's always like 2 shrimp. It's like that first time Forrest Gump went out and he comes back and dumps his shrimp basket from the boat and there's only 5 shrimp in there. Todd, wasn't there like a whole like mess of shrimp back in the day?
Well, so I will read to you from Walt Disney's Epcot here. In the aquacell, shrimp are raised in a controlled environment. In the absence of predators, 50 to 70% of shrimp eggs survive to adulthood. If you like shrimp, you'll love Epcot Center's aquacell.
There you go. I do love shrimp, so
yeah, I'm ready to get out and catch me 2 of those shrimp.
Well, isn't that a neat idea that they could actually make the food that they're going to serve up in the Good Turn, like right there in the greenhouses?
Yeah,
what a great concept! And
I remember one of the
fish out of the living seas tank when you're at the coral reef.
Hey, this is the 21st century. You pay them enough money, they'll let you eat a manatee if you want. So from the fish farm aquaculture section, you then sail into what is the final part of the attraction, which is to show new ways in which researchers at the land are growing food. And first you go through sand culture, where there's sand on the ground, and they show that cotton and cucumbers were being grown in the desert as part of their example of things that are to wow you. And future technology. So they talk about futuristic ideas here, including ideas for growing food on the moon and genetically altering crops to make them more nutritious and resistant to diseases and pests. Some of this is still talked about in the attraction today. And then as you sail through all of that and past the lab area where they show them working on different kind of plant life, and the lab's still there today. For a period of time, that lab has always had badging that showed it either affiliated with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. For a period of time, there was a NASA badging on there. I think there's still some NASA experiments in
just
in
before
there.
You exit the room.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you sail past there and then into, at that time in 1982, the Symphony of the Seed concluding scene. And it was, again, much in line with Raleigh's aesthetic, where you had these colorful designs. This room today is where you'll sail through, and there's a bunch of different panels that show people's faces from around the world, and delivers kind of the benediction, the concluding message of the Living with the Land attraction. At that time in the Listen to the Land, if you watch one of the ride videos of the time, usually the live narrator spent that scene giving you pitches for the rest of the pavilion. Go see Kitchen Cabaret, go see Symbiosis, have something to eat in one of our restaurants here. So I think that's one thing where the attraction today probably gets it a little better than the attraction back then with the live narrator. A couple of footnotes on it, and then I want to read a little finale from Raleigh Crump on the attraction. Nestle took over sponsorship in 1993 from Kraft. The Symphony of the Seed opening and closing scenes were taken out. So the Symphony of the Seed opening was removed for a storm effect that basically extended the rainforest scene. They were going to add more drama, and the finale, as I just mentioned, was changed to this scene from the series of panels showing people around the world.
The opening scene was probably a little bit dated. The storm, I get the drama, and I understand not opening it with the song, but it's really a shame that the song is timeless. There's nothing in it that dates it. It's a shame that didn't continue, because you have that dark tunnel now with just people's faces, and it could really be spruced up by bringing that original song back.
As we talked about in the River Country episode and probably a half dozen others, it also was a victim of a specific time that they decided to redo this attraction. The whole singer-songwriter thing, which Bob Moline was certainly a part of, that 70s and early 80s, those guys and that kind of music was still very common, very popular. By the early 90s, you just didn't hear it. And so I think the fact that they did those changes in 1993 and through 95, really, it just was a victim of time. Right. And had it kind of held on maybe another 5 or 6 years, just like when they took the Imagination song out of the second iteration of Imagination. And then when everybody freaked out, they brought it back in the third version. I think the same thing would be the case. I mean, hopefully if they ever redo this ride and keep a lot of it, the song gets restored. Because I agree with you.
Yeah. It'd be great to have it back.
Yeah. So the other thing that was changed in the ride was the other than narration throughout, was the barn scene, the barn theater scene. They changed a lot of the stuff that was in there. A lot of the similar messaging, just different words, different visuals in that scene as well. So those were the changes with the refurb after Nestle took over. And Nestle's sponsorship ended, I believe, in 2009. And in 2011, Chiquita signed on, but they don't sponsor the pavilion, they just sponsor the ride. So Raleigh Crump's book, which I will plug as we periodically do, called It's Kind of a Cute Story. You can order it online from any number of places, but we'll post an Amazon link for it. He has a whole section on his design and work in Epcot, and specifically the land. But I really wanted to share with you all kind of his synopsis of his work there on this particular attraction. Again, remember, he worked with Carl Hodges, who was the horticulturist from the University of Arizona. And he said, Carl and I laid out where every single plant should go in that ride. I think Carl and his hydroponics kind of took the land up to the next level. He really helped make it a success. It was really the only Epcot pavilion actually doing the work that would help bring us to the future. It wasn't just some ride telling us about stuff that could be coming soon. You learned about the future advances, and then you got to see it happen right in front of you. I was really thrilled about the ride. It always made me laugh that you could go through the ride to see tilapia in their tanks swimming around, and then you could go upstairs and eat one of them. So that was Raleigh's...
Very blunt and to
yes. Raleigh's synopsis of his work there on the land pavilion, and specifically the land ride. And I kind of agree with him. Anybody who wants to talk to me about how Epcot was in 1982, I tell them go today and ride Living with the Land, because by and large you're getting a good sense for what those attractions were like, and that's right, ranks up there. Certainly Horizons, which didn't exist yet for that first year, was was the best of the best. The Listen to the Land boat ride.
Yeah, it's amazing and wonderful that for the most part it's largely unchanged. I mean, some of the stuff has broken, but other than that, I mean, the things in the greenhouse have certainly swapped out, but like that core section of the ride is really the way that it was designed in '82. So yay, something.
Yeah,
retro.
so we have a couple of other things in the pavilion to talk about, and Todd, you're going to walk us through Symbiosis, which is not as extensive as the land boat ride, but certainly worthy of our mention.
Yeah, it has to be mentioned because it was a staple there for nearly 12 years, over 12 years actually. So Symbiosis. This was presented in what was called the Harvest Theater. So if you came into the pavilion and you went down the right-hand side, there was only two ways to get down into the center, the right or the left. Kind of the hallways hugged the edge, and the atrium was open in the middle. So if you went down the right-hand side, and still there today, you would approach the Harvest Theater. And this theater is known for something we all love and adore in our hearts, a special place in our hearts for this, and that is, what is it, Hal?
It is wall carpet.
Wall carpet, that's right. Now, some of the original wall carpet that dates back to 1982 is still hanging floor to ceiling, and you can just go in that queue and
just like a corrugated
put your
wall.
5 fingers out and just run down the wall and feel the different textures, loops, and sheer. It's like it is. It's like a corrugated wall. We need a picture of the 5 of us, and then there'll be our next album cover.
You know, I never really got the wall carpet thing, and then I was pondering it today, as as sometimes I do, and I realized if you're looking for something that is a wall covering that is long lasting and durable, carpet certainly does that on the ground. So if you put that up on a wall, like, it's going to last longer than paint, it's going to last longer than wallpaper. It it doesn't get dirty. If it does get dirty, you use
sound insulation,
an industrial carpet cleaner, and it comes off, and there you go.
It's brilliant.
It's 35 years later, it's still kicking.
It's still kicking, and this one was cut in a really neat pattern that was very resembled of Pergeroy's work as well. So it's really neat. So even if you aren't going to go in and see Circle of Life, an environmental fable, you need to at least go into the queue and take a look at the wall carpet.
Yeah, get your picture with the wall carpet. That makes you like an official Epcot fan.
Exactly, yeah. So Symbiosis, this ran from October 1st. It was opening. What's really interesting about this film was actually done ahead of schedule, and they had enough time to program it. As Brian was mentioning, this pavilion opened, and this was no exception.
I'm going to jump in here too. Although I wasn't as much of an Epcot nerd, or at least as much of a community and an Epcot nerd prior to Epcot 30, I thought it was me and 12 other people out there. Before I had the conference with 1,200 of our closest friends. But I'm going to give some credit to Imagineer Jason Grant, who you can find on Twitter at 43 Square Miles, because it was his presentation that focused everyone on the wall carpet. And he was part of his presentation on Epcot, and he made the jokes about the wall carpet. And I don't remember it being as big an attraction prior to his doing that. So even if he doesn't deserve the credit, I'm giving it to him anyway.
It was, and honestly, it was the only thing to look at inside that waiting area. I mean, it still is, but now there's some monitors in there, but like at the time, it was probably one of the most godforsaken places that you could ask to like wait for a movie because
it's this odd triangular room, and
the film was 18 minutes long. So you would get packed into this little room. It's fairly tight. It doesn't have a high ceiling. There are the wooden benches that are lining one of the walls, or a couple of the walls were there then.
Like 4 of them, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's hardly anything. And when it was very busy, like we're talking about, when like that room would be packed full of people, it's like the very lucky ones would get to sit down. The unlucky ones would be standing up, or kids would be sitting on the floor bored out of their skulls.
Or creating static on the wall.
Yeah, there was like 1 or maybe 2 like Duratrans backlit displays with a couple of pictures and a text description of the movie, and like you were so bored that was literally, it was fascinating to look at that and read that because there was nothing else to do in there. It was a terrible waiting area.
Yeah. So how, as you said, the movie was 18 minutes, and this movie was directed by Paul Gerber. He also directed 2 other films that we have become to know and love at Epcot, one of them being The Seas, which we talked about in a prior episode, and also the film in Norway, which that is definitely gone now, and that will certainly become part of a episode in the future.
The spirit of Norway lies in her people.
There we go. You were not the first to pass this way. So Paul was actually Marty Sklar's brother-in-law, and he got the job of going around and filming his first of the 3 films. It was a 70 millimeter film, so if you think about that, that's almost 2.5 inches wide. 70 millimeter is the same type of film that is projected in IMAX, the same size film. And he shot this at 30 frames per second, and you think, well, why are you telling me this? Well, it gave it it's the only film that I know of at Epcot and other Disney attractions that were 30 frames per second, so that it was super smooth. It didn't have the flicker, that you would get in the other. So it was a much more realistic approach. And
there's an interesting thing about it. I just watched it again the other day, and I had seen it before, but it had been a really long time. And so I'm watching it, and I said, this reminds me of Koyaanisqatsi. And Koyaanisqatsi was this film. I actually had to look and see when it came out, because I'm like, did one inspire the other? It's impossible. It couldn't have, because they were released within, Epcot opened, in October of '82. Koyaanisqatsi came out literally a series of weeks before that. Very famous in 1982, Koyaanisqatsi, which is a Hopi word. It means life out of balance. And it's all instrumental, very much like this film is. All these environmental scenes, and you go from these majestic scenes to a junkyard and things like that, and that's the same feel that I got from this. So it's very interesting that they were so similar when clearly they could not have seen each other's work.
Right. That's interesting, and that's a great segue here, because the whole film was supposed to be about the technological progress on the environment, how we interact with it, damage it? What do we do to repair it? So after it was shot, the first cut ran about 25 minutes, and management and operations wanted to get 3 to 4 theaters per hour, so it was cut down to 17 minutes to get that to get the capacity up. The soundtrack was written by Patrick Gleason. If you look him up on IMDb, he's got a lot of different credits to his name, and he was got a lot of almost horror-looking films that he did. So, and the soundtrack, when you listen to it, is kind of ominous. It doesn't really have a lot of upbeat feeling to it like the other Epcot attractions. In fact, even listening and watching the opening, you think, here comes something, and it just doesn't reach that crescendo that the other pieces have out there. It was narrated by Philip Clark. He's got hundreds and hundreds of pieces of voiceover work. He did a lot of random characters in different Disney movies, including Aladdin and Little Mermaid and all sorts of other animated features in and outside of the Disney name. So again, he's got a great Internet Movie Database to look at. Yeah, so the film was finally edited down to the 17 minutes, and that's a long period of time. And when the film opens up, there's about 1 minute in, the dialogue stops, and it takes about another 3 minutes before the narrator says anything again. And the opening is all different shots of migration of animals, a lot like what you see today in the Lion King film, which we'll talk about a little bit. And then becomes one of the most well-known shots that is still used in the Lion King film, where you see a Native American on a horse, and the camera quickly pulls away out to a dam that's overflowing and everything. That's probably one of the signature shots in this film, as well as the ending. The film then goes into different segments about rice and how we can improve it, water in the desert, Holland, moving their water to create land. There is another great shot where they have a shot of the model of a dike system that's being built in Holland, and then it fades into a overhead shot of the actual system being built out in the water, which is really neat. But essentially, what they say after that is that, hey, things went to crap. They start to show all the pollution. Again, very similar to the Lion King environmental fable. They talk about Lake Constance, the lack of fish in the River Thames, and then they go, what about forests? And one of the known quotes is, the onslaught of technological man. And it just shows all the severe logging and forest fire, and that goes on for another 2 minutes of absolutely no dialogue, which is, I'm going to talk about the film and my thoughts on it in a minute. So I think you're kind of seeing how it is. It builds up to something, and then it just kind of almost goes on too long, almost like a Family Guy episode, where they just beat something to death
for comedic effect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was watching it, and I'm going, I remember seeing it in the theater when it was there, but I was like, wow, this just goes on and on. So anyway, we replant the forest, and we talk about how technology can be balanced, and the final shot is wonderful. It's done really, really well. There's just a farmer standing in a field, and this is the time before drones and all this stuff, and they just pull back gently from the farmer, and before you know it, it's pulling back further and further and further and further. There's no CGI, and he's standing in the middle of hundreds and hundreds of acres of field. How you saw it, and Brian, you've watched it on there. I think you saw it, but do you guys agree? The film it didn't have that punch. It never had that moment that you just went, wow. It never, like I said, the music didn't have a crescendo. It never hold anybody in.
I got to see it quite a few times, and I know I went and videotaped it before because I knew it was going out, so I went and taped it with a tripod. So I have to another one of the 20,000 things I need to digitize and get on YouTube. I thought the film was very powerful, and it's funny. I have this book about like the work of the Walt Disney Studio, and the author of the book calls it a blend of science and entertainment. This film's breathtaking photography makes it the most outstanding of all the film presentations at Walt Disney World. So
interesting.
I mean, somebody thought it was awesome.
That guy obviously never saw Impressions de France, but
I have to admit that the cinematography is amazing. I mean, they traveled around the world twice to film this thing.
Yeah,
and they went to great locales. But
I mean, the fact that a lot of this ends up in the Lion King movie,
right,
I think is a testament to the quality of the photography.
Exactly.
Perhaps it was a little slow for, Joe Tourist.
Right.
So
the delivery wasn't there. And even when you look at the power of the films that you had in Norway and stuff like that, where the shots were done quicker, the Seas film that was faster.
So if you look at the Seas is what, like 3 minutes, 4 minutes long?
Yeah,
But
it was a pre-show film.
Yeah, so it's very powerful, but and very serious, but it's really short.
Poignant.
And then
the same thing with the Norway film.
It's and even with the Norway film, that's like 6-7 minutes, maybe 8
tops. Yeah.
And people still walked through that because they couldn't tolerate doing that at the end of the ride. So now it's like, okay, so here's that, but 18 minutes long. So you're probably just asking for trouble.
Yep.
With the American attention span.
Right. Now, I mean, having to watch it on YouTube, and somebody had it on their shoulder on an angle, doesn't give the same effect to watching it in the theater, 70 millimeter.
Yeah. Oh, it was beautiful to look at. For sure.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So we're missing something going back and looking at it today. I mean, the music's good. Like I said, I never felt it had that.
Yeah, I mean, people used to put up with like 22 minutes of American journeys at a Circle Vision 360 film. So
yeah, and it's worth noting, I mean, that the film appeared in several film festivals after the fact. I mean, he displayed it, in fact, at a 70 millimeter film festival sometime in the last 10 years. I mean, I just wish it was in circulation so we could see it. Like,
right. Yeah, decent. So, Symbiosis closed in 1994. On New Year's Eve was its last showing, and the theater basically remains unchanged since the opening day, but it did reopen on January 21st the following year with The Lion King, an environmental fable, which is basically, like Howe said, has a lot of the original shots. Almost the whole opening scene is all original. They pulling back from the Native American, but the dam is still there. And obviously with the addition of known characters and known voices, and shrinking it down from 17 minutes, I think, down to 13 or 12 or something like that. You had a higher capacity, plus I think it told the story. It's this kind of the same point, but just in a little more humorous fashion.
A little more accessible,
to the and I think, I think that one's gonna probably still run for a while. I think it still has its pulling power.
So they closed the theater for a refurbishment last year.
Yeah.
And it was closed for a while. I want to say 3 or 4 months at least. So there was speculation with, oh boy, we're finally going to get a new film. We're going to So they reopened the thing. And I remember going to watch it last fall when I was there. And I'm like, oh, this is great. I can't wait to go in. I knew that was the same film, but I sit down and really all they did was put new carpet and new seating in the theater. And we sat down, and the film comes on, and it was out of focus. And I'm like, all this. The only thing I see is the Lion King film, but it's out of focus.
Did they didn't even convert it to digital projection either, right? It's still.
They may, maybe something tells me they did.
Okay.
Because that's just logistics at a certain point.
It doesn't make sense to make the copies.
They don't want to keep running 35 millimeter films or 70 millimeter films. But I think they did. I think that might have been a change to it too. But in terms of the content, nothing changed.
Right. So there we have it, Symbiosis.
So yes, so you've ridden a boat.
Yep.
You've seen singing food.
Yeah.
And you've watched a movie about pollution and the changing Earth.
And I'm getting hungry after seeing those rice patties.
You have probably worked up an appetite.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what Kraft, the original sponsor, wanted you to do. So, as I mentioned, they had several dining options, which are still there today. The first on the upper level is a rotating restaurant. When the pavilion opened, the restaurant was called The Good Turn. In 1986, it became the Land Grill Room, using the same font on the sign as The Good Turn. And then after Nestle sponsorship took over, they redid the restaurant as the Garden Grill, which is what it is today. The rotating restaurant was designed by the Macton Corporation, and they are the company that has designed mostly all of the rotating restaurants that exist around the world. The interesting thing about, or the catch, I guess, for this rotating restaurant is that as you rotate, it displays different views of the animatronic scenes in the opening of the Land Living with the Land boat ride.
So yeah, as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the attraction going through, a lot of those scenes, such as the rainforest and the prairie and the desert scene and as well as the farm, were designed much taller than you normally would for, say, a Spaceship Earth or anything. And that's because, as Brian pointed out, the restaurant had a view of that. So they were designed in a way that the horse perspective would still kind of work from up top, because the glass railing, you could sit there and you'd see right through. You'd see the canopies of the boats go by, and you could, in the right spots, you could wave to people and see the figure. So it was really neat. I remember being there a number of times. It was about an hour per rotation, and I always remember being bummed out. Like you'd go past the farmhouse and you could see the upstairs. They had the upstairs room set up with a lamp in it and everything. And then, you know, if you're really unlucky, the first time they would sit you down, like you had to wait from the mural and go all the way through the through the queue area before. I was so bummed, you know, like, oh man, it's gonna be at least 20 minutes before we get around.
The thing I will note, if you eat there today, which was true back then, if you are on the lower level, on the outer ring of the rotating restaurant, you have a great view of the scenes. If you're seated upstairs, you really have to kind of get out of your seat and strain to see down into the show scene.
It's not exactly.
So your best seats are the horseshoe-shaped ones, the horseshoe-shaped booths that are on the lower level, on the outer ring of the restaurant, because the restaurant's 2 levels. Not that you can't see from the upper levels. It's just you get a much better view, a much more immersive view,
right,
from the lower levels.
And it's. I remember speaking to one of the waiters there a number of years ago. My grandfather asked a question. He goes, "You know, we're rotating, but the kitchen isn't. What do you do?" And because the entrance to the kitchen stays the same, and they do have to keep in their mind where things are. And I believe there's some sort of marker system or something, so they can know, where the table is that they're serving. So.
I remember having that same conversation with a server sometime there in the last 5 to 7 years.
So, tip them a little extra. They're working hard to find your table.
Absolutely. So Kraft was the original sponsor, and because they were the original sponsor, cheese figured prominently on the menu at the Land Grill Room / The Good Turn. So just for your to whet your appetites, some select Land Grill Room menu items, some of which you can find the recipes for in Cooking Around the World with Mickey, both versions 1 and 2, which we gave away a copy of a few months back. But those cookbooks are readily available on eBay and Amazon, used ones from back in the day. And I recommend picking up a copy if you're interested in perhaps a cheese spread, cheese ball, cheese nut and mushroom ball. Cheese bread, which was also available in the farmer's market downstairs. A roast tuna loin. I did not know tuna had loins. A mesquite grilled boneless baby salmon with orange walnut butter. Or perhaps Key West pizza. I have no idea what that is. Or the orchard favorite dessert, which was strawberry crepes. And the coup de grace, a deep dish apple pie, which was also available at the Farmer's Market and Rose and Crown in the World Showcase. How did you and your family enjoy that pie in all 3 locations?
Oh, hell yeah, you know it.
With lots of whipped cream.
Oh, whipped.
No.
That's exactly how the narrator in Symbiosis would pronounce it too. Whipped.
Yeah.
Laboratories.
Right, we would, once we finished our pads of butter, which had the shape of the EPCOT logo in it.
Oh, yeah.
Then we would put the pads of butter on the apple pie, because that's good too.
Ooh, that is good. And I'm surprised. I wonder, because of Kraft, Todd's up in New England, and one of the things they do in New England is they put cheese on apple pie.
Oh yeah.
So I'm curious if Kraft made that an offering option in the Land Grill Room with some cheese topped pie.
Somewhere I'm gonna have to look. I have a couple of cards from the Land Pavilion from Kraft. There was some sort of like recipe cards, like sort of 3x5 printed on both sides, of recipes that they had served there, and I got a couple of those in an eBay auction a few years ago.
So let's say you're not in for a sit down meal, or the thought of rotating as you eat was going to upset your stomach. Perhaps you'd step out and look in the atrium and say, I'm going to go down to the farmer's market. But before you go down to this farmer's market, which we'll tell you about, you're entranced by the fountain that's below you and the mural above you. And Todd, I know you have some things you want to say about that.
Yeah, so the mural we talked about, you've got that above that is in the inside of the volcano, or the mountain, if you will. And it's really neat because this is unfortunately has been painted over since some of the restorations, and now they've just got kind of that garish blue color and stuff. It just doesn't look. But this mural had, birds and clouds and all these different things with nature, and it really, really looked nice. There was waves of water, and it was a mixture of blues and greens and stuff. Looking down as you came down, the fountain was huge. I would say that was probably, oh gosh, I'm trying to think, probably about, what would you say, guys, about 25 feet round? What's the whole fountain?
At least. Yeah. So it was surrounded by tables.
Right.
So there was
tons and tons of tables.
It was really cool. They had like seating built into it on the outer ring.
Right. It was like a bench that you could sit at, and then you share the tables. The tables, ironically, I was told, and if you look carefully, the tables and the stools form Mickey heads, if you ever noticed that. So I don't know if that was purposeful back then in 82, but just saying what it is. There's a great shot of it, and it really evokes the whole mall theory and mall look that we talked about in the 70s and 80s, with the staircase coming down on either side. But that whole area there, looking up and seeing the wall carpet outside the Harvest Theater, the balloons overhead, it was one of the first food courts that you experienced, and it was very light and airy in there. I really enjoyed it, and I still enjoy the space today, but I don't think it has the same appeal and feel that it did back then.
No, I mean the space today, the attraction is still being able to eat there, and the food offerings that are there is very diverse. It's an easy place for families to grab a quick bite to eat, even if you have a kid who only eats mandarin orange slices or something, because the food court / farmers market that we'll talk about is convenient for that. But the thing that strikes you if you look at the overhead shots looking down on that, we'll call it the atrium area, the dining area out there, when the fountain was there, and Raleigh Crump's original design, the umbrellas were custom made to match the custom made tables that were rounded, and everything kind of fit with the fountain. And now they're stock table and chairs, in that it looks like a cafeteria almost in the one half, especially with that half wall built out there to hold the condiment stations and the trash cans and all. It just has a very different look and feel now.
The umbrellas lit up. Remember that?
Yes, they were 2-tiered umbrellas with like an indirect light in the center.
They had speakers in there too. The music from the area would play from the speakers inside.
It's such setting the feeling of where you were. That's
all of that was gutted and taken out in 2005. There were a couple of redos, but so 93, the sponsorship shifted from Kraft to Nestle, and there was a series of redos done at that point, but mostly what you're talking about, Todd, the ceiling mural was painted over. They added these banners to help with the acoustics, which are still there, the things that hang down and kind of cascade from the ceiling down.
The paint job that they did reminds me a lot of what they did to Seabase Alpha. We're just going to take three shades of blue and cover all the fantastic artwork. It was really a shame.
So the balloons were changed first from food groups to the weather and seasons. That was to accompany a shift in the name of the pavilion, of the dining area of the farmers market, from farmers market to Sunshine Seasons Food Fair, which hung on for about 10 years. And then in 2005, when they ripped out the original seating and destroyed the fountain, they redid the balloons again, and they changed the name to just Sunshine Seasons. And the other thing that was done was the balloons stopped moving, so the balloons don't go up and down anymore. So all that was the 2005 refurb. But we're telling you about this area because you head down the escalator or the stairs or the elevator.
Only one elevator
and
back then.
Now there are two. Just in the last year, there's two. But back then, there was only one elevator tucked off to the side of the land grill room. And you get to the ground level, and there is this beautiful farmer's market in the back of the building. And what was going on back there was there were basically stations, it very much looked like what we know today as a mall food court, although it didn't exist back then, themed to be a farmer's market. And your original stations back then were soup and salad, pastries, sandwiches, barbecue, potatoes, the ever-present cheeses, ice creams, and beverages. And my story as it relates to this, and we will certainly give you some of the menu options, some farmers market menu options had you been so desired to go there back then. You could get chicken gumbo or bran muffins that were also available at the Coral Isle Cafe in Polynesian Village. Corn muffins, the ones served from Pioneer Hall in Fort Wilderness in Columbia, Harbor House at the Magic Kingdom. And I'm drawing these because I'm assuming how a lot of this was done at Central Foods back when they had Central Foods.
Yeah, that's exactly what this was.
Before the third-party operators came in and replaced a lot of that. Blueberry muffins, and there was all these delicious muffin options. Chocolate chip cookies, hermits, which were raisin pecan cookies apparently. Pizza quiche, which sounds interesting. Baked potatoes, and the deep dish apple pie that we mentioned earlier, Hal. Lime chiffon pie if you were feeling like something you want a little light. But one of the big menu items I'm going to mention that was available here and is now famous amongst the small subset of the Disney fandom was the Handwich. And the Handwich was a futuristic sandwich that was sold in Tomorrowland, I think at the Lunching Pad, what is today the Lunching Pad, and in Epcot at the Farmers Market. And I remember it vividly because in my first visit in 1988, we had lunch one day in the Farmers Market, and I got a beef barbecue handwich. And what it was like a 12-inch hoagie roll that they lopped the one side off and scooped the inside out, and you held it in your hand like you would hold like a soda or something, and they would fill it from the top with the meat or filling of your choice. Tuna, beef barbecue, ham and cheese. There were a couple of other options.
It was like a meat ice cream cone, huh?
It was. And when I ordered it, there were two things. I was 13 years old. My mother was a terrible cook, still is. We never had beef barbecue. I didn't even know what it was. So I bite into this thing, and not only was it so cool that I could hold it in my hand, but it was awesome. And I'm like, this is great. So the reason I tell you the story, aside from it being pertinent to our story today, is for the next 6 years, I would tell people, I got these handwiches. You got to try them if you go. And so I finally get back there 7 years later, 1995, and I tell Rob, I'm like, man, I want to get one of these handwiches. So we get to there. They don't serve them anymore. They got rid of them a couple years ago. Handwiches don't exist.
Yeah, and that was short. It was short-lived, but very distinct.
Yeah, late '80s and early '90s. Yeah. It lived. I think there is an extensive article written by George Taylor or somebody. Somebody wrote an extensive Taylor, or rather, article online about the Handwich, and so it did. So the Handwich lives on. That was the place where you could get it. As I said, Nestle took over, changed the theming, changed everything there. The one thing Nestle added to the area was a chocolate chip cookie making attraction because they're famous for their Nestle Toll House morsels. So off to the side of the seating area, they had a junior chef attraction where a cast member, presumably trained by Nestle, would take a group of 12 or 14 kids or whatever it was, give them all little chef hats and aprons, and show them how to make chocolate chip cookies. They would sit there and mix the batter, and then I don't think they sat there and waited 10 minutes for them to bake. I think they probably did all that pretty quickly, and like a TV cooking show where they put the batter in and 1 second later they're pulling out a freshly baked tray. I don't know. I never did the attraction because I wasn't a kid. But that was the one thing that they added, and that lived until their sponsorship ended, which I think was 2009. Yeah, theirs ended in 2009. So
I'll tell you one little weird thing that I remember from this area, and I can't recall if it was downstairs in the farmers market. I think it might have been, or if it was upstairs between the Harvest Theater and where you'd walk to the grill room. But I remember there was kind of like an old-timey, like turn of the century car. I think that like a craft thing that was painted with the craft logos on the side, like an old delivery car. But there was yeah, that was downstairs. But there was also this window, like maybe about 10 or 12 foot tall, with like a bunch of craft ephemera in it. It included, there was like a little model car and like a bunch of old photos and old wrappers and things.
If I remember correctly, that was outside of the Good Turn restaurant on the right-hand side between the restaurant and the Harvest Theater. I think that's I remember, yes. And they had all the different old craft, mustard bottles and ketchup and all sorts of different things.
Yeah, it was just this little, very craft,
like a little museum
thing. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So no discussion of the pavilion would be complete without a couple of footnotes. First is that elevator we mentioned went up and down. And if you got into it with the right combination or key, you could get up to the third floor, which was a sponsor lounge for Kraft and then for Nestle. The sponsor lounge, which you can see today if you're standing where the garden grill is and look above the marquee, you'll see a bank of shaded glass windows. Those are from the sponsor lounge up on the third floor. It's not used today by a sponsor because the pavilion doesn't have a sponsor, but employees and executives of Kraft and then Nestle back in the day could go up there, and presumably it had the same facilities that the other sponsor lounges has, which is a refreshment area where they would normally have beverages out for visitors, their own set of bathrooms up there, and generally some kind of conference meeting rooms and lounges for the use of their people should they want to have meetings there or just go up and relax. So that no crystal piano up there. They had a macaroni and cheese piano up there. Yes. So that's up there. The other thing is the addition of Soarin'. So the story is that after Soarin' over California was the big hit when they opened Disney's California Adventure in 2001. They almost immediately decided we should bring this to Florida. And EPCOT, which was in need of some love at the time, and new attractions was the first and probably only real consideration with where to put it, especially because it's such a large attraction and EPCOT is the spot where they have this expanse. So apparently, if you read the stories, they wanted to put it in World Showcase, but they could not agree on which country or where it was appropriate to put it back there. So if that is the truth, then ultimately it was decided that the land pavilion was the place that it made the most sense in Future World. Hardcore Epcot fans will disagree. It doesn't really make sense in the land, but that's where it ended up. So in 2003, they closed Food Rocks because, as we talked about in that episode, they needed to destroy some of the theater for the queue area, which is where it is today. So an enormous show building behind the land was built, which is what that long corridor that is the queue for Soarin' is you leading back to that large show building. And they added Soarin', and so popular and such a crowd draw that they last year completed a duplicate theater. So there were two Soarin' theaters originally. They added a third theater to try to help, and it has helped. If you go ride it now, the wait times have gone down. It's still probably one of the longer waits you'll encounter during the day, but it's nowhere near the 90, 120, 150 minutes you used to encounter over there in the past. So that attraction is there. I always kind of thought that the show building actually sits equidistant between the land building and the Imagination building. So I always said it would be very cool if they could simply have rethemed it and connected it to the Imagination building, because I think it would be a cool attraction if it was like Soaring Over the World with Figment and Dreamfinder. Like that.
See, I want Soaring Over Symbiosis.
There you go. Actually, you could just recreate Tony Baxter's journey of the seed and water ride, but you just do it from there, like a hang glider ride. Yeah. So those are the two footnotes. It is probably the pavilion, along with Energy, that most retains its original EPCOT feel.
I mean, other than the paint job, nothing's really been, obviously Kitchen Cabaret is gone, but the whole, the main attraction really has not changed a lot, minus some songs and a few things, and the core is still there. But
and I have a tip for the retro fans.
Well, let's go.
If you would like to hear the original music that played downstairs in the farmers market, go up to the Good Turn restaurant to the bathrooms on the second floor, and they still play that same audio loop that was originally played down in the farmers market.
Find a stall. Find a stall.
Get comfortable.
Yes. Once again,
sit there with your omnidirectional microphone and just listen away. It's funny you mentioned the music because I remember during a bad rainstorm when I was down there last year, we camped out. Thank God for these apps on your phone now, like Dark Sky and stuff that say like, the rain will be over in 27 minutes, so we know how long of a wait we're in for. So we got in there, we watched the Circle of Life film, and then we went down to the food court to just kind of hang out and wait the rain out. Because we knew it was only going to be about 25 minutes. So we're sitting down there trying to wait the rain out. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in the chair in the dining area there, and I hear the E.T. music. And so I look and, I know what the E.T. theme song sounds like. And I'm like, why are they playing the E.T. song, which is a Universal attraction down the road, and a Universal film here and there. And then after that, there was another one that came on that was some odd film music that had nothing to do with Disney. It was another studio's film music entirely. So that's an odd loop down there now in the dining area.
The land always reminds me of a perfect place for a field trip because you have these different attractions to go to that kill your time, and then you have a place to eat, and then you do, the last attraction, then you get out. It's like it looks just like where you'd go for a school field trip.
You could easily spend 3 hours there.
And I remember going in there to get away from the rain or to do stuff, but it was always like, oh man, we gotta go to the land. We gotta walk all the way down around the side. It's gonna take us forever to get down there.
And Todd, since you brought it up, you should mention Behind the Seeds.
So for a number of years, they have been offering tours of the greenhouses. Back in the mid '80s, it was called the Tomorrow's Harvest Tour. It was a guided tour, about 45 minutes, and 30 to 45 minutes would take you into the greenhouses, and the guides are all members of the agriculture operational staff, and have degrees in some area of plant science. This is what it was back in 1986. You would pick up your tours near the Broccoli and Company store, which was basically where the Soaring desk is now, and down that area in the Soaring level. And the tour is continued. It's now called Behind the Seeds, and it's a 45-minute tour, and I will actually be taking that next week, so possibly I can ask some questions and see if I can get any inside information on anything about the old attraction, the way things were. Maybe if I ask nicely, they'll take me back to see Kitchen Cabaret too, or what's left of Food Rocks. But you can still take the tours, and I think it's like $40 for the 45 minutes or something. It's not too bad. So guys, I think that about wraps it up for this month. Got to close the books here on the land and move on. But how, as always, you have some new merchandise, right?
We definitely have a Symbiosis shirt. I actually managed to track down the original font that was used on that Duratrans display that I talked about for.
Oh, I thought you traced it or did some sort of Adobe magic. You did a tribute to Wall Carpet on the shirt as well.
Yeah, so we mentioned the Wall Carpet because it's so famous.
So if you happen to know Paul Gerber and need to get him like a Father's Day present, we're going to produce that for you. Who may be the one person in the world who wants a Symbiosis shirt.
But the one that I'm really excited about, it's actually a tribute to Horizons that Jason Bartel helped out on when he was doing his 3D modeling on that. He actually reproduced the logo for the Pegasus, which was the hovercraft used in the Mesa Verde scene. So we've made a Pegasus t-shirt for fans of Horizons, and I think a lot of people really like that one too.
Yep, pairs well with the Mesa Verde University shirt, and obviously points to some nods of the future of what's coming later this year, I believe.
That's right.
we're gonna do that. So we also have we have a couple new things to talk about too. Stickers are now available again on our shop, so they've got all sorts of great stickers of all this. So if you don't feel like splurging on a T-shirt or anything like that, grab a couple stickers. We appreciate it.
Yeah, they're like $2.50 or so. Inexpensive.
Very inexpensive. And we also have the Now is the Best Time clock, which we just released, which is in the design of the Carousel Progress, says now is the best time. And that clock can be found at retrowdw.com/clock. And as always, you can find all of our t-shirts at retrowdw.com/support us. And just a reminder, everything that you purchase and any proceeds that we make go directly into producing this podcast, keeping our servers online, and buying and restoring the films. And we have released some new films. We've got a lot of them coming up. And so we really do appreciate any purchases that help us continue this going.
And if you have any films, let us know.
Yeah. We did have somebody contact us recently that they had some beta tapes that they wanted to work with us on to get them out there and let everybody see it. So looks like that'll be great to do. All right, so next month we'll take you back to all those television specials in the 70s and 80s and take a look at those and talk about them. And we'll do some extra, possibly do some extra listener mail and some other things thrown in. And guys, we should probably talk about some of the films too a little more in depth. We released so many of them over the time, so we'll talk about some of the special films that we've released and what they've got. All right, guys. Well, as always, thanks to all of our listeners. Really appreciate your feedback. Send your comments and questions, as always, to podcast@retrowdw.com. Give us a shout out on iTunes if you can, a review anywhere you can as well. Much appreciated. We really enjoy bringing this to you, and I hope you've enjoyed this show. And with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro Disney World on Twitter and Instagram @RetroWDW, on Facebook @Retro Disney World. And for all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, you can find our producer, Jason Bartell from Deepwater Studios @JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner @Andre Gardner. And follow our hosts, Hal Bowers @GoAwayGreen. For JT Kuzier @LS1JT. And you can find me on Twitter and Facebook @Brian P. Miles.
Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land. When autumn falls, it's a harvest show, with north winds blowing all the seeds that it must sow. Come winter time, the rain must fall, till once again the new year and the springtime call. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land, listen to the land. Let's listen to the land we all love. Nature's plan will shine above. Listen to the land.